Chapter 223 to 225. Electromagnetism. One of the four fundamental forces of the universe, and arguably the strongest among them as well. That's exactly what my Goro Goro no Mi can control now. Previously, I only had control over lightning and thunder, which was basically electricity powers with the bonus of a bit of sound generation ability. However, now all of that has evolved to this. Keep in mind, electricity and electromagnetism are two similar yet entirely different things. Not to be confused. I could control a bit of EM before, but that was so little that it shouldn't even be counted. For example, in the past, I could mold gold and shape it in whatever way I desired. I could do it by messing with the electromagnetic bond of the gold. But I also needed the additional help of heat in such a case, but now I wouldn't need it. I'm honestly excited after this. I can do so many things with this alone now. I recall some truly powerful fictional characters whose main powers were based on electromagnetism, and now I had my hands on this too. There are many powers I know I can use by training and learning. Some of them are, well, godly. And finally, the last one is the one I am most excited about. Manipulating reality using the electromagnetic field that is present almost everywhere in the universe. This all sounds fictional, I am aware. But let's not forget this world itself is based on fiction as well. Though the thing is, I can't do any of the above-mentioned things. Not yet. They are things that I can only do after decades, or maybe centuries of training. However, what I can do right this moment is more than enough for the emperors of the sea. It was then, can you move? The woman who I was sitting above muttered. I looked down at Yamato, who was on the floor, lying face first, while I was sitting above her for whatever reason. What am I doing? Fucking fuck. Instincts? I guess nothing artificial is perfect. It seems I inherited the instincts of Oars and Big Mom, those two beasts. Not a bad thing, truth be told. I just need to make sure to not do silly things. I stood up from on top of her. My bad, Kwahaha. I stopped again. Fuck. And would someone explain why I am laughing like this again? Fucking useless add-ons. Sigh. Just as I stood up, Yamato also slowly got up from below me and tidied her dress before looking at me with thinned lips. I guess none of the strong people is fine in the head. I am fine in the head, right? Yes, I am sure I am fine. Probably. Also, she turned her face around her, eyeing the training hall. You should be careful of your attacks. Looking at where she was staring, at the training hall that was shattered as if a certain Whitebeard had smacked it with his tremor fruit, I couldn't help but grin. With widened lips, I answered, Not really. I have money. Every damage was done whilst training is tolerable. How did I cause such damage, you asshole? Electromagnetism is everywhere, in the air, in the sky, and even in the exact space in front of us. So, what if, using my fruit which now lets me see and touch the EM bonds present in the air, I just yank the bonds off with my bare hands? The space will collapse. That's what'd happen. It's kinda like that move Whitebeard used in Marineford War, but I guess it's a little weaker. Anyway, I patted Yamato's shoulders, who wiped her bloody lips. I went kinda harsh on her with my fruit, yet she is pretty much fine. The regenerative powers of the zones. Truly dangerous. That's why I want the best regenerative zone. That'd cover the only side I lack right now. Yamato, take a rest. I would suggest you be at your top condition considering what is about to come. Yamato looked a bit confused as I contemplated my actions for the Marineford War. A few days have passed since Amon officially dropped his humanity, and today, right now, at Saobawadi Archipelago, something important was happening. Cling! Dark King Rayleigh's sword clashed with Admiral Kizaru's arm, his metallic left arm. My! Kizaru, haven't you changed your look since the last time we met? Kizaru growled at Rayleigh, poking at his sore spot, but he just made his usual ooh sound. It's all thanks to a certain someone, of course. He kicked Rayleigh, who simply dodged it by backing off a step. Rayleigh laughed at his words. Kid he talked about hockey 6 years ago was strong enough to injure an admiral like this. Hey. A certain someone, you say? Yet I don't see any seriousness in your eyes. You haven't learned anything, have you? Rayleigh was half wrong and half right. Kizaru wasn't serious, true, but that's because he didn't see this situation as something serious. However, his other statement, "You haven't learned anything," irked Kizaru. That was not right. He has learned a lot. He learned a lesson that finally forced him to let Dr. Vegapunk implant something in his brain that the 5 elders were asking him to implant for years. That'd assist his brain in surpassing its processing speed, thus giving Kizaru a chance to overspeed Amon. He didn't feel like using it on small fries as it does have some drawbacks, so Kizaru scoffed with a lazy smile. His eyes drifted far where Kuma was blowing a certain crew of straw hats in the air. You are good at buying time, Dark King, but... Kizaru then snapped his finger, causing a cloak of light to cover the area briefly before it returned to normal. Something flashed behind Kizaru, but Rayleigh couldn't focus on it just as Kizaru's metallic arm glowed golden, heating up. This was one of the killing techniques that he learned. I believe we've played enough. Let's finish this. Rayleigh simply chuckled. He could already see his attack's trajectory. Ha! And this same admiral once was known as the fastest man alive? Truly pathetic. As Kizaru's heated red arm punched towards him, he simply kicked the ground to back off. However, shocking him to the core, he realized someone had just grabbed him from behind, restraining him. Ow! Rayleigh turned behind to find another Kizaru behind him who was restricting his movements while the first Kizaru punched at him with the glowing arm of his. He soon realized what the flash behind Kizaru was. It was his reflection. As the realization hit him, and as the metallic arm came closer to his face, Rayleigh's shocked face formed a smile. Heh. As the blinding light caused his vision to go white, the back of a man wearing a red captain's coat appeared in his vision, who turned to him and offered him a hand. It seems we are going to meet again. Roger. Boom! With the sound of a loud explosion, everything went white as a rare laugh left Kizaru's lips. While Kizaru was busy with Rayleigh, Bartholomew Kuma was also finishing his job. You! Luffy glared at Kuma, who simply walked closer to him with heavy steps. Luffy was on his knees, blood dripping from his injured right arm that was damaged by a certain Eustace kid, so he couldn't muster any strength. Why are you doing this to us? That was the last thing he could say before Kuma blasted him with one of his paws, just like his other crewmates, sending him somewhere where he'd be safe and sound and receive the chance to get stronger. And thus, the War of the Bests was now one step ahead. Portgas D. Ace's execution will be held in 3 days. Kaido had a large grin on his face as he read the headline of the newspaper this morning. Wororororo! The large barrel of wine smacked the ground and shattered under the crackling black lightning surrounding Kaido's fist. What would you do, old man? He asked towards the sky, addressing Whitebeard. Your son is gonna die. Would you sit still? Or would you jump at them and show them why you're called the strongest? He hoped it's the latter. Because if so, he'd also get a chance to show. He'd be able to show who's stronger, the strongest beast or the strongest man. After all, there can't be a lion and a tiger in the same jungle. Fortunately, as far as Kaido was concerned, someone like Edward fucking Newgate would rush to the depths of hell if it concerned any of his son. So a war amongst Whitebeard pirates and the Marines is inevitable. Kaido was actually planning to go after Amon when he first heard about Big Mom's death. He was so infuriated, but somewhat around the same time, he learned about Ace being taken by the Marines from his information sources, so he decided against it. Amon was a brat, he can fight him later, but Whitebeard? Edward Newgate was a man. If he goes after Amon and receives an inevitable injury, that'd mean he won't be able to be the guy who would end that man's life. He didn't like that fact, so he stayed patient. He convinced himself which was the better deal. He can always hunt down Amon after the war, right? But he might not get the chance to face Whitebeard ever again because he had a gut feeling that the old man was going there intending to die. "Waroro! King!" Kaido stood up, calling King, who appeared behind his throne, out of the shadows. "We leave for Marineford right now." It'd take a bit of time since they will go slowly, considering they don't want to waste their energy by flying too fast. At Kaido's words, King nodded, just when another deep and heavy voice flew in the room. "Can I come too, Lord Kaido?" Kaido turned to the broad and tall man, huge enough to reach his chest, who walked inside through the front door. "It's you, Rio." Kaido looked down on him. Rio is a Skypiean who freed himself from Amon's ruling a few years ago by starting his journey as a pirate before joining the Beast's pirates via Jack later on, who died not long after that, giving Rio a chance to prove his worth and become one of the three calamities of Kaido. He's been greatly useful and helpful for the past few years. He is strong, too. So Kaido thought over his proposal for a bit. I don't see a problem in that since you can fly fast." Kaido's confirmation caused Rio to nod while King eyed him with unreadable eyes. "Follow me now. I won't wait." Saying such, Kaido jumped out of the window and transformed, flying in the sky just as King, the wildfire, and Rio, the eruption, followed suit. Luffy didn't expect to hear something this absurd after being sent to this island. Unlike the original timeline, this wasn't the Amazon Lily, after all. Dragon wouldn't risk sending his son to an island ruled by Amon. At first, when he fell to this unknown island after Kuma's paw bubble burst, he coincidentally met Belo Betty, the East Army commander of the Revolutionary Army, after looking around for a bit. Things weren't bad after that. He got to eat the meat of tasty sea kings, eat desserts, and sleep tight. Oh, he also learned that all his friends are at good places after Betty confirmed that Kuma and she were comrades at arms, and all of this was Monkey D. Dragon's plan. After that, Luffy learned about the Revolutionary Army a bit, and since now he knew Monkey D. Dragon was his father thanks to Garp, he felt much safer here, since even if he never met his father, being under the protection of a blood was better than being at a random place. He didn't bother asking Betty about Dragon, though. He simply didn't care. But of course, eating meat, sleeping tight, then waking up and continuing the cycle wouldn't make him the Pirate King. So he did bother Betty with his constant wish to see his crew ASAP. However, Betty kept refusing. This annoyed Luffy, so he at last tried to fight his way through. Betty being a woman didn't concern her. His fist didn't care about gender. Though surprisingly, Betty was super strong from a woman with a slim body and huge boobs. From his experience, girls with huge breasts are dumb. Nami, for example. But he can't stand it any longer. "Betty, you don't understand. I need to be there." This wasn't about his crew. This was about his older brother, Portgas D. Ace. He wouldn't let anyone touch Ace as long as he was still breathing. "You're the one who doesn't understand." Betty took a puff out of her cigarette. "It's impossible for us to reach there in 3 days. It'd at least take 2 weeks for us to reach Marineford from here, in the New World." Luffy wanted to say something. No, he wanted to say a lot. But he couldn't find any words. He couldn't find any excuses. Betty doesn't have any reason to lie to him. And he, for one, knew how long it takes for one to travel from one island to another, and this was traveling from one part of the Grand Line to another. He couldn't blame anyone. He didn't yell this time and thinned his lips instead, a weak voice leaving him. "Is there no other way?" Luffy looked at Betty. His determined eyes glittered in wetness. If he couldn't reach Marineford and even try to save his older brother, then how would he ever become the Pirate King? But Betty sighed. If only Karasu was here. She was acting. Luffy didn't know, but Monkey D. Dragon could send him to Marineford in a second. No, less than a second. If we don't count Dragon, there is still Karasu, like Betty said, but he wasn't at this place right now. However, from his current location, it'd take him a mere hour or two to reach here. The reason why Betty was lying was because of the orders she received from her higher-ups. Monkey D. Dragon could see how the Battle of Marineford would end. By the time the battle starts, this won't be a battle between Whitebeard versus Marines. This would be the war between the Emperors of the Sea and the world government instead. This would be the biggest war since the one that happened 800 years ago. Oh, so who'd go to the war? Why don't we take the 3,000 super animals of Shiki Island? Oh, and Nola too. How about we bring all of God's army instead? Wait, why not both? Amon simply tapped the table once. That's enough. Everyone Sin sat around the round table stopped talking. We are not going to eradicate the Marines. No need to go that far. We are just showing them what we can do, not by quantity, but by quality. Reiki raised her hand. Then, Amon raised his hand to stop her and continued. That means we'd only take our best, meaning me, the Sins, and the entire motor gang, oh, and Miss Yamato as well. Serious question. Rocky raised her hand slowly, praying he'd not stop her again. Since we are indeed going, and not just you, does that mean we get to show off a little? Or would it just be you, Lee? Or are we just there to fill the player count? Amon considered her words. This indeed was a serious question. He hummed. Both. The meeting of the Sins was taking place in a room inside the Shrine of God. There. Reiki was slightly wrong when she said, to fill the player count, because just in the room beside it, multiple Amons were present. They were training. You think this is the way I should do it? You mean we? Just say it, dumb fuck. Try to move it reverse clockwise. They were conversing with each other as if they were different people. This would shock anyone other than Doflamingo and Kizaru, who could make clones using their devil fruits as well. Doflamingo did it in a very creative way. He first made a copy of his own body using his strings, even going as far as giving colors. After that, he connects his brain directly with the clone, using the same technique that he uses to control other people. Kizaru is different, kind of. He uses his to reflect his body, which automatically creates a copy of himself along with the clothes he was wearing. Then he uses light solidification to make the intangible light tangible. However, Kizaru can't control his clone, or rather his reflection, as accurately as Doffy since he can't control it with his mind directly, so he instead just manipulates its movements using his, well, light manipulation. Amon, on the other hand, does a mix of these two, in a sense, but it is more complex. In short, just like when Amon once learned to make different electrical objects using the art techniques taught by Robin, now Amon merely focuses his imagination, then forms a look-alike using his electricity, copying every detail of his body. After that, he uses something called electricity solidification, quite similar to Kizaru, truthfully, which solidifies the usually tangible electricity. After that, things are easy. Since the clone Amons are made of pure electricity, Amon can control them with his brainwave, his neurons, directly. They're just external neurons at this point. The edge Amon had that the other two don't is exactly that. Kizaru would be able to create thousands of clones, but not control even two. Doffy would be able to make a few properly functioning clones, but the number won't pass double-digit. However, Amon can create clones on the triple-digit yet leisurely control all of them. Now he was not a man, he was an army. On second thought, he has always been a one-man army. Monkey D. Garp stood straight on top of a rooftop in Marineford. Garp! He heard his friend Sengoku's voice calling him, but he didn't turn back. I know how you're feeling, but you know and so do I. This is just baiting for that old Whitebeard. Ace wouldn't actually be executed. We will just put him in impel down, but he'd still live. Garp had to agree that he wanted to punch Sengoku right now, but he also had to agree that Sengoku held a valid point. As the Marine hero, he at least had enough power to keep his grandson safe. The plan is, Ace would be stabbed in public with the two blades. However, the stab wouldn't be lethal. After that, Ace would be taken out of public and tend to his injuries, and then he'd be sent to impel down. Even the admirals weren't aware of this. There was no apparent issue with this plan. As long as nothing unforeseen occurred, his grandson would be fine. Monkey D. Garp had two choices, family or Job, and he, in this timeline, had chosen both. There were only a few hours left until the execution, so Admiral Akainu came to do his job in Impel Down. He was disgusted by the scent of filth, the scent of evil. A part of him wanted to bring down justice right here by drowning Impel Down in magma. Criminals such as these shouldn't even get the chance to stay under a roof. No, they shouldn't even be allowed to live. But he held on regardless. Unfortunately, the greater law didn't work with his own. If he breaks the greater law, the 5 elders will take care of him, and he couldn't let that happen since he wouldn't be able to bring any more justice if he died here. Move! He pushed the criminal walking slowly in front of him. Gold D. Ace, or his fake name, Portgas D. Ace. He was the Marine hero's adopted grandson. Good Lord, this made his skin crawl. A great figure like Garp was nurturing a snake? This had instantly caused him to lose a large portion of respect for Garp. That man was a hypocrite. At his push, the criminal Ace almost fell on the ground, but Magellan grabbed him by the shoulder and helped him stand straight. Akainu grumbled. Pathetic. The motherfucking Pirate King's son? This guy was a piece of weakling trash. He wanted to punch through his chest right at this moment. Right now, Nico Robin was at another place, far from Marineford, far from Skypea. She wore a white dress, if it can even be called that, with revealing cleavage and side boobs, along with a blue feather coat. Her hair was styled like Canon post-time Skip, as she had a sunglass resting on her head. She sat on a couch, her right hand resting on it. She came here with a gangster look, intending to intimidate the person, or rather the duck, she came to meet here. Big News Morgan, the albatross devil fruit user. He's a special man for many reasons. One, he holds one of the most dangerous powers in this world, the media. This is something that Amon wanted but couldn't get, because of the second reason. The albatross is immune to brainwashing. It's as if his brain had gone through the attempt of brainwashing multiple times before. So Amon had no choice but to negotiate with him instead. He tried forcing him before, threatening his life even, but none of them worked. The bird was simply too passionate about his job. He didn't want to write fake news. He didn't want to share his information source either. Amon would have normally killed the board. If a guy with such powers didn't join hands, he should have died. But Morgan had his uses, such as right now. Mfufu. Mr. Morgan sure knows how to amuse his guests. Robin muttered as she took a sip of the tea, to which the duckman laughed hectically. Kuwahahaha. Please, please don't flatter yourself. I am just being courteous. Though I am curious why Miss Nico Robin is here. Surely you didn't come here for the tea? Robin nodded at him. Of course not. I am not free enough for that. Unfortunately, I have actual reasons to be here. Normally, Lucy... Amon would have come by himself, but he's a little busy, you see. Robin giggled again, while Morgan grew nervous. What is so important that the Sky Emperor wanted to visit himself? Robin could see his concern, even through his duck-like expression, but she simply slipped her hand inside the pocket in her feather coat and took out a note. Please read this. You'd know what I mean by the end of this. Soon, Big News Morgan would have a big news to write. However, this one would be fake. Just right then, Kaido, King and Rio were flying above the red line. Everyone knows how big Red Loon is horizontally, but even horizontally it was a few hundred kilometers long. King had a strange longing look as he flew above the red line, his old home. Lunarians are a race created by mating the ancient Skypieans and flame elves, the inhabitants of Moon 6, the aliens who can use fire-type abilities. The beginning of this race was an experiment by the ancient winged race to create strong slaves, so they married their people with the flame elves, thus causing the birth of Lunarians. After that, as the Lunarians served the winged race for centuries as slaves, they finally decided to fly down to the blue planet. There, they were worshipped as gods. No, they played God because they were the strongest. Of course, none of the above-mentioned things was known by King currently. Only Amon knew this because of Seraph, the AI. That's not the point, though. The point right now is, it seems soon, very soon, the Lunarians would return to their original place. No, they won't become the rules of this world again. Rather, they'd become the slaves of Skypieans because, just then, crack. The distinguishable sound of advanced conquerors' haki rang in the air, causing King to alert himself. But before he could realize anything, a painful jab fell on his neck as he flung downwards to the red line, his home. At the same time, Reo was also falling with him, and the only one in the sky was Kaido. However, not even 5 seconds later, the large body of Kaido smashed downwards along with them. By the time they crashed into the red ground, which didn't cause the red line to even bend, surprisingly, dust filled the air, and as it cleared up, the figure of a one-handed, red-haired Shanks entered their eyes. The man stood with a single sword in his hand as he started at Kaido, who had turned into his human form. None of them even gave Rio or King a glance. "Kaido, I gotta stop you here. Go back." A grinding laugh left his throat. "Worororo, you wish!" At an instant, Kaido kicked the ground, his club on his hand, as he rushed to Shanks, who simply took a stance with his sword. Rio and King wanted to intervene. Well, King did. Rio didn't have any intention to die here, but before King could, he felt a metallic pipe pressing down on his skull from above his suit. Puff! The smoke of a cigarette covered his vision. "Don't move, fallen god!" Beckman started at King's glaring eyes nonchalantly. All the while, a real god was looking over the fight that was taking place in the ground of old gods. God King Amon stood above a fleeting cloud as his shining red eyes observed the battle. He needs to make sure Kaido reaches there, so a fight with Shanks is inevitable.